I think more people will come, but let's start already. So, welcome everybody to this session on technical and cognitive skills, and especially on the success thanks to those skills. Why success? It's because today, there is really a lot of focus on physical skills, on medical skills, maybe tactical and teams. But the specific skills of a football player that distinguishes him from the rest of the team, except from the skills I just mentioned, that's something that is really not common today in football. And that's why I want to talk about this and make this to your attention, that it's quite important to keep this in mind, that there is much more than physical skills and than technical and cognitive skills. So let's start. I'm Tanguy, and I represent my company, Scarab Sports, to get to know you and to get you acquainted with this new dimension in football. So, first of all, you see here 6 great legends. I think you all may know them. But the question is already answered, but I will ask it again. What is for them the thing that distinguishes them from all the other players, and why they are legends like they were, or like they are, I think, about Kevin De Bruyne, for example, on top? Well, it's very simple. It's because those guys, they just see the game, see the action way before another one. These are not the most physical players. They are not the fastest players. Not at all, even. But it's those guys that make the action and make the game worth it to watch. Well, if we weren't able to discover that talent on those technical and cognitive skills, these players weren't there, of course. But they had the luck that they had a coach that had a subjective view to see the talent in them, and of course to train them and develop that talent. Not everyone has that same luck as those 6 or many other players have. So, as I said, they see the action way before all the rest of the players do, and that's what made them exceptional. So I want to go deeper into the definition of what they do exactly. They scan, but they don't just look around, because I think if you scan and you just look around but you don't do anything with what you see, it's not really relevant. So they scan the action and they screen in that way their surroundings, but they do that to use the information to perform the correct action at the right time. And that is very important. It needs to be a functional scan. It don't need to just be looking around and seeing things. No, you need to translate it. So, for example, let's take one of the 6, Xavi Hernandez. The Spanish people may know him very well. He scans like 8.5 on average, 8.5 times every 10 seconds. That's a huge amount of scans in comparison to a normal player that does that only 3.5 times. So this is something that shows that those great players, because they scan a lot and they can translate it into the correct action at the right time, they perform way better than just the normal players. Let's take a scanning example. I'm a Belgian, so I really like to bring up some Belgian examples of our top players. So here is an action of Kevin De Bruyne and Romelu Lukaku. And what will happen in that action that I'll show you on the next slide is that Kevin does 5 scans in 8 seconds. He looks at Lukaku when Lukaku touches the ball, and he looks away when the ball is away from the feet of Lukaku. So that means that he has, in one scan, he sees every action on the pitch. He sees his surroundings of the players running, and he sees his teammates performing a technical drill so that he can anticipate on it. So as you see here on the slide, he starts by scanning the area Lukaku doesn't have the ball. And then when Lukaku touches the ball, Kevin looks at the ball. And then it continues like 8 times towards the end. And at the right moment, at the right time, when Lukaku gives the pass, Kevin De Bruyne knows exactly who is everywhere, where is everywhere, and can score a magnificent goal against Denmark that has turned around the world. This is an analysis by Gail Jordat, and he's a guy that really goes deeper in that analysis and that analysis of translating the cognitive skills or the analysis into technical drills. So let's continue. To summarize what happened there, it's really a scientifically based loop that happens all the time during a match. A player that does this a million times. It's called the OODA loop, and that stands for observing, orienting, deciding, and acting. This is exactly what Kevin De Bruyne did in the previous slide. He observed his surroundings, he oriented himself into space, he looked at what are the best actions to take, he decides, and then he acts also accordingly. This is very important. Let's say a player doesn't act good, his technical skills are not very well then the sense of looking around is lost. Otherwise, a player that looks around continuously, a player that have great technique, like a street footballer, a player that can juggle 1,000 times, well, if that player doesn't look, his technical skills are lost during a match 11 versus 11. So it's really important to have the link between both. Let me take some examples of where the players have that skill, but unfortunately, these players were rejected by their academy because of their late maturity. They were not physical enough. They weren't fast enough when they were young. And because we only have objective data on those specific skills, those physical and medical skills, the analysis and the decision-making of the, let's say, the management or the board of the clubs, they don't look at the really subjective skills right now, for example, that technical and cognitive side. Let's take Antoine Griezmann. Antoine Griezmann was rejected by Lyon, by Saint-Etienne, by Sochaux, all because he wasn't physical enough. Harry Kane, the same way, rejected by Arsenal because he wasn't fast, he was small. Of course, I'm speaking about when he was young, but it's there that the talent is discovered. Dries Mertens, one of our own, a Belgian, he was rejected by Anderlecht, he was rejected by Ghent, all because he was too small and not physical enough. What was well the case, his coach in the youth teams, he said, subjectively for me, he's the best technical player, he's the smartest player in the academy, but unfortunately, he couldn't prove that in numbers, and so when the decision comes at the board says, yeah, no, for us, he loses all his duels during matches, so we can't see him perform correctly, we don't have results, he needs to go. If we given those guys more time, yeah, then Ghent, Anderlecht, Arsenal, Saint-Etienne, and so on, wouldn't have lost millions on those great legends today. Dries Mertens is all-time top scorer at Napoli. Harry Kane is a wonderful player. Griezmann here at Atletico, Barcelona, such a legends, but all the clubs that rejected them, they lost something because of they only focused on those physical aspects. So it's really a problem today. Another problem that also comes into play here is the relative age effect. I don't know if you know this, but the relative age effect means that players are always screened at the same time. So you come in an academy, let's say in June or in July, you're all screened at the same time. But that means that the player that is born in January from that year or a player that is born in December are screened at the same time. Let's say when you were 12 years old, 13 years old, yeah, the guy of January or the guy of December, there is a big difference in physical because 12 months' time is a huge amount of time for young players to develop physically. But they are all screened on the same moment. Let's take, for example, the FIFA U17 World Cup in 2020. There was a research, and they were looking at the birth months of European players at that World Cup. And we see in that research that 50% of all the players were from the first quarter, so January, February, or March. That means that those guys were selected before by their coaches, by the management, because physically they were stronger than the guys in December. And this relates, look, only 10% of the players, of the European players, only are from October, November, December. This is like 40% difference. It's a huge amount, but you're not going to tell me that players born in December have less talents less footballistic talent than in January. No, it's just because they were screened at the same time, but they come from different birth months. So this is a real problem, and what we want to do is we want to tackle this by bringing that new dimension, as mentioned, that new dimension of technical and cognitive skills in talent development and in screening. So, to summarize, today we know everything about the physical part, the medical part of football players. There is also a psychological part, mentality of the player, but I'm not going to go into deeper of that. That's really for the psychologists among us. But what we want to talk about is the link between that perceptual cognitive skills and the technique of a player. And it's that link that is so important. As said, if you only have the cognitive side and you can't make it into a right technical action, it won't work in a match. Vice versa, if you are a crazy technical guy, ball handling is magnificent, and you want to translate that and you don't look, let's say, you don't look around, you can't see what's happening, then you will not be able to perform your technical action because a defender will, for example, get your ball. To continue, at Scarab Sports, we'd like to call that link or that specific skill cognitive functional technique, or shorter term and maybe easier to remember, CFT. This is a word that really describes what I've been saying. It links the cognitive side not to just pure ball technique, no, functional technique, technique that means something in a game, the technique that will make it happen to score a goal, to make that last pass, that assist, to give that 90% pass accuracy that the wonderful football players in the world can do. On the cognitive side, to describe a bit what's underneath it, we have scanning, of course, but scanning that to translate it in information processing. Thinking ahead. Thinking ahead means if you see something, you can anticipate and already, for example, turn open because you know there is a running player, and a lot of players, what they do, they receive the ball, they put the foot on the ball, and then they start looking. This is way too late. You need to know in advance, thinking ahead, what you're going to do. This will speed up the game and speed up the skills of the football players. Reaction speed, of course, you need to translate that as fast as possible. If you need to think too much before you can perform your action, a defender will get to you, of course. And in general, of course, the game perception, that's also with tactics and so on. But again, if you don't look and you can't translate that, then it doesn't work. On the technical side, you have ball handling, efficient ball touches. Now we see that players, a street soccer player, he wants to touch the ball as many as possible, but that is not, in current football, it's not relevant. You want one-touch football, maybe two-touch football. That's the best way to go as fast as possible to the other side and make the goal. I translate it really simple, but in C, it's really the case. So you want to go to that point that your players know in advance where to go, and they only need one or two touches to give that next pass. Of course, the pass needs to be accurate, it needs to come, that's all part of that technique, but it starts by looking and knowing in advance what you're going to do. So, as I said, in the practices of your club, your academy, your institution, first of all, it starts at training. You can train on individual skills, you can train in team, and both are even important. Earlier in time, it was really only team tactics and players all day, always match situations. But we see that clubs and academies and institutions start really to develop their players individually, to then put them in a team. And it's on that individual side that you can really train on that perceptual cognitive skill or that cognitive functional technique. On the individual side, you can create individual training with reactive impulses. That does not have to be the coach again, like before, with two cones behind their back, red and blue, for example, and if the coach shows blue, then the player has to do this or that. No, that's something from the past. The coach doesn't have to do that anymore. He can focus on coaching, helping his players improve. You can also put that in specific skills, of course, so that you train your attackers on specific exercises that translate match situations. And all of that you need to take in mind that the OODA loop, as mentioned earlier, needs to be taken into account. You need your player to observe, to orient himself in the space, to decide a certain action and to act also accordingly. In team, then, you can put your players into match situations. And in that match situation, it's also important to improve and add a new dimension. If you just put small-sided games, 2 goals, they know exactly where to go and they don't train on changing environment. In a match, you never know what your opponent is going to do, so you need to trigger that during training. What if you say that your goals or your players need to change all the time because they have to look their surroundings, and if let's say that goal is lighting up, for example, and just at the latest time you want to score there and the light goes off and you need to change of play and turn the other side. Well, that's the training that you want to create, and it's not the basic training as before, 1 goal at each side and just play 11 versus 11. The other part on the team is very important, and I think all the athletes and coaches will agree. Internal competition. Every football player is a competition animal and wants to be the best. So also that, trying to take into account during trainings that there are data metrics or scores that are during training tracked and captured so that a player can compare each other to the benchmarks set by the best of the team and always want to do better. The second part is screening, and then we go specifically to youth development, and that's what I want to add on top of the fact that, for example, there was the problem with the relative age effect or the late maturity. If we can screen this cognitive functional technique, we'll add an extra checkpoint in screening, and we will be able to help the decision makers within the club to make a more objective decision before letting a huge talent go, and not only focus on that physical and medical aspect. When you track your player, of course, not only one number that you get a whole data sheet, and there you will be able to detect deviations on those specific skills, start training on it like I mentioned before. A complete player profile, I think that's the goal of football, it's what we want to create. And as I showed the circle before, you want to have the 100% of your football player that you know objectively. This won't, I don't think it will be possible, but if we come as close as possible to the 100%, then we're really far, and the gap or the error of the margin of error will be much, much smaller, and I think that's the goal of everyone. So next to that, when you have your player profile, please track him in time, track his evolution, and give him time to develop, because we learn of some clubs that after a couple of months, the player is not performing in match and youth teams, and they already let him go. That's way too early. Give him time, 4, 5, 6 years. Give him time to develop physically, and use the talent he has that you screened, that you trained, to make him a good football player. The last aspect, and that's maybe a little side aspect, but it's very important to take in mind, rehabilitation. We know it for physical aspects, we know it for medical aspects to get in shape, but you want your player to be reactive. You want your player to be reactive on the ball. Let's take a simple example. Your player has had a concussion during a match. Okay, you start rehabilitate him. He starts doing physical exercises to get the muscles back on, to start and going back in the match. But you forget that the reaction speed of that player during, let's say, a couple of months of injury has gone way lower. So that means that during a match, because his reaction speed is slower, the chance of new injuries will become bigger, and then the chance of your player going back to the injury bed is just immense. So let's please don't compare physical fitness to cognitive fitness. Those are both things to take into account and to get together into the rehabilitation process of your players. In all what I said and all about the training, the screening, the rehab, context is key. You need to put every exercise, but I think I don't need to mention that to the coaches here in the room. You need to put everything, you need to translate your match situations where you saw a player was fault. You need to translate that and put that in specific, maybe abstract match situations to start training again. Always in the right context, but I think if the coaches are well trained, that shouldn't be a problem. At Scarab Sports, I won't go too far on this, but you can, if you want, you can go at our booth to check it out. But just what we did is we developed a rebound board with lights, interconnectable, and so that are possible to place everywhere on the field, create exercises and tests, because it captures all kinds of data for the times, force, passing accuracy. And in that way, we trigger by lights, we trigger the reaction speed, we trigger cognition, and we ask the player to react with feet, with the ball, with a technical action to create that link as I was talking during this presentation. It's all just connected to an app. You can download on the App Store if you want, and then you can connect to boards, set up your exercise, and create really a multitude of exercises in the context that you like, to create really abstract match situations, to develop your players, and bring them really to the higher level. And don't just focus on the physical aspect, don't just focus on the medical aspect. Please go and look further to the technical and cognitive skills, and especially the link between both. I would thank you very much for listening. Please come by our booth, test out the technology if you like, test out your skills, and we will be more than happy to give you more information on everything you like. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the audience right now? All right then. I think there's a question? Yeah? Yes, sir.
Thank you. About how were made the measures in order to play between De Bruyne and Lukaku. How were the measures made of his scanning process?
How it is made?
Yes, which is the way of measuring. Where is his focus about the position of his eyes? I don't know if in this person, Gail Jordet, he already took some kind of cognitive sensors or whatever, or is it just about the picture we're taking from TV?
Yeah, it was really what he did is he took the match footage. He zoomed in on both players. Now here it's just pictures, but he zoomed in and he actually looked at the scan of the player. That's something that you can view and see on the video, and then he just put, of course, little dots. Then you say, okay, now he scans left, he scans right, and he knew that when he scans that way, it's to scan the surroundings as mentioned. And that way, you see on the video that he goes really straight to the ball of Lukaku to know. And that's really important. As I said, it's important to know when your teammate has the ball, and when he doesn't have the ball, where are everyone else positioned on the field. I think there was another question? No? Okay, perfect. All right. If there are no questions anymore, I'd like to invite you to our booth, test out the technology, and maybe have a chat later on. Thank you very much.